Hey, Pastor Kevin here. And today we're going to be talking about the Roe v. Wade situation in the United States. Even though we are here in Canada, that decision overturning Roe v. Wade certainly has caught our attention. The issue of women's reproductive rights or bodily autonomy, especially around abortion, somehow has been synonymous with Christian. And I don't know why that is, because every denomination has a different policy and theological stance on the issue of abortion, which makes the whole issue of Christianity and anti-abortion being synonymous as being really disingenuous. For example, our own Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada, our policy on abortion is we don't encourage it, but if a woman chooses that, then we will walk alongside her, offering pastoral and spiritual support as she goes through that process, and we do so without judgment. On the other hand, I know the Episcopal Church in the States, I'm pretty sure, has a full-throated affirmation of a woman's right to choose in her own reproductive rights and when she wants to choose an abortion. So they are fully supportive of that choice without any reservation. You may have zeroed in on the word evangelical, because of course evangelical Christians are opposed to abortion, right? Well, it depends how you use that word evangelical. Evangelical just means the gospel. We are a people of the gospel. When Martin Luther was kicked out of the Roman Catholic Church, the church he created he called the Evangelical Church, the Church of the Gospel. And then when the settlers came into the United States, coming from Europe and England and those sorts of places, they created a different kind of, they took that word, evangelical, and changed it, meaning a personal experience or a personal conversion with God. So are we evangelical Christians as Lutherans? Yes and no. We are evangelical in the sense of Martin Luther's understanding of the word, but we are not evangelical in terms of people like Baptists, Pentecostals, Alliance folks, and those sorts of Christians. In fact, we are quite distinct from them. They do not baptize babies, we baptize babies. They focus on individual salvation, we focus on the new creation of each person and in the whole world. And the list can go on and on and on. But the big difference is our political involvement. A lot of evangelical Christians, especially in the United States, are very active in partisan right-wing politics, where Lutherans tend to stay out of the partisan political spectrum. So circling back to the question of abortion and evangelicals and how they became synonymous with being anti-abortion. Well, it goes back about 100 years, actually, 100 years ago. I think it was March 21st, 1922, Harry Emerson Fosdick at a Presbyterian church in New York City preached a sermon that went what was called viral at the time, went through newspapers and such, called "Shall the Fundamentalists Win?" And with it, he was directly criticizing, critiquing, even attacking fundamentalist Christians who were opposing evolution and didn't want evolution being taught in schools because it didn't jive with a literal creation story from the Bible. We won't get into that, but he was worried that the fundamentalist thinking of anti-science, anti-intellectualism was going to gain traction in American life, in possibly North American life. And so he preached a sermon greatly attacking fundamentalist thinking. Shall the fundamentalists win? He asked. I don't know if you can read this, but it says from February 1973 Religious News magazine report on Roe v. Wade. It says, Dr. W.A. Criswell, pastor of Dallas First Baptist Church, former president of the Southern Baptist Convention, expressed satisfaction with the ruling of Roe v. Wade. Quote, I have always felt, he said, that it was only after a child was born and had life separate from its mother that it became an individual person, and it always and it has always. Therefore, it seemed to me that what is best for the mother and for the future should be allowed. So this is coming from the Southern Baptist Convention former president when Roe v. Wade was happening. But then certain leaders in the Southern Baptist Convention and other evangelical organizations found their wedge issue. So they flip-flopped on abortion and used it as the issue that defined Christians throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even obviously in today. And so to say that this is a Christian issue is grossly disingenuous. Because, as I said before, every denomination has their own unique understanding of the issue of abortion, women's reproductive rights, and bodily autonomy. I can't speak from a medical perspective because it's far too nuanced, but from a religious perspective, I think these sorts of decisions will hasten church religious decline in North America, as all churches will be tagged with this decision, which is incredibly unpopular. And young people will not be looking to the church for spiritual growth and nourishment. They'll be looking elsewhere because they see in the church an authoritarian regime that's wanting to control people's lives rather than setting them free in the good news of Jesus Christ, setting them free to be the people and persons that God created them to be without the church dictating what they're supposed to do with their lives. Because from a religious perspective, it makes absolutely no sense to take one religious doctrine from one tradition and impose it on everyone else. And next they're worried down the pipe is contraception and same-sex marriage to be deemed illegal in the United States. And all of this comes from the idea, the fundamentalist reading of the creation story where God said, go be fruitful and multiply, as if that was for everyone for all time, rather than just for Adam and Eve to get the world going, hey? And so because abortion, contraception, and same-sex marriage do not result in babies, they are to be made illegal. Of course, this is just a broad brush overview of the religious underpinnings of the overturning of Roe v Wade and the opposition to Roe v Wade. Some other excellent, more nuanced discussions of it. As I mentioned before, Diana Butler Bass, she has a Substack called The Cottage. So you just Google Diana Butler Bass, The Cottage, and take you right to it. Also, Martin Marty, the Lutheran historian from University of Chicago, his magnum opus was on fundamentalism. And a more recent book on this is called Jesus and John Wayne, How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation by Kristen Kobes-Demaz. An excellent resource, excellent reading, all three of them. If you want to learn more about the fundamentalist, again, underpinnings of what is happening right now in right-wing politics in the United States and how some of it is creeping up here into Canada. Some of it, I see it in the so-called Freedom Convoy. There's a lot of fundamentalism, religious fundamentalism there that is undergirding much of what they have to say. A lot of Christo-fascism is another word that I like to use, that is happening among extreme right-wing organizations to try to impose a right-wing totalitarian vision of life for this country and basically for everywhere. So just some background on what is happening in the news from a religious perspective, and we'll go from there.